Welcome to Wife Teacher Mommy, the podcast. I'm Kelsey Sorensen, a former elementary teacher and current homeschool mom. And even though I've been a resource creator since 2014, I've realized that printables alone aren't all you need in order to thrive as a teacher or homeschool parent. That's why I also created this show and got certified as a life coach to help you finally kick burnout to the curb and feel confident with whatever challenges come your way. With the right mindset strategies and new teaching inspiration, you're going to be well on your way to your best teacher life. Now let's go.
Okay, everybody, let's start our model mastery. First things first, let's talk about what the model is. So it is our self-coaching model. There are 5 parts to it, and it is what we use to help us understand how our thoughts create our feelings, drive our actions, and results. It is a mindset tool. So it is, when you look at, it's a top-down approach to understanding ourselves. So there are 2 different approaches we can look at. We can look at a top-down approach, which is when we see what is going on in our mind and how it's impacting our body with our feelings. And then there's a bottom-up approach as well, which is when you kind of see what's going on in your body, if you're dysregulated with your nervous system, or if you just have strong emotions that you want to process before you get into thinking about it. That would be a bottom-up approach. We're going to talk about that even more next week. In the club, we want to help you get the best ideal top-down and bottom-up approach for you, which is going to look a little bit different for everybody. And we're just here to help you get your toolbox and get all the tools that you need to live your best life, to handle all the situations that come up when you're teaching or parenting or whatever in your life. Like, this is not just for your teacher life. This is for your whole life. It's for situations, absolutely anything. So first, I'm going to write down some letters on the board that help abbreviate each part of the model. So first, I'm going to focus on the first 2, and I'm going to see, okay, there we go. First 2 parts of the model. Oh no, I should have checked my marker, you guys. Do you see that? It is not working. You all can relate to this though. We're all teachers, right? I should have checked my marker. I'm going to go grab another one really fast. While I do that though, so the first 2 parts of the model are the C and the T. Okay, so the C and the T, circumstances and thoughts. Okay, so I want to talk about these 2 for a minute before we dive deeper into the model. So the difference between our circumstances and our thoughts. So first, our circumstances are completely factual. It's just like what is there. Now, some people, like my mentor, Brooke Castillo, she would even use the word like neutral to describe it, because it's like, it's not good, it's not bad, because there's no brain to put the meaning behind it yet. It just simply is. It's kind of like that analogy about like a forest. Like, if no one's there, are they there to hear it? It's kind of like there's no brain to interpret this. It just is. It's not good, it's not bad. It's just what exists in the world. Now, our thoughts are the stories that we, and even like subconsciously, that like our brain is telling ourselves. They're the sentences that are ruminating or going on in our minds. These are objective, meaning that there's a story behind it. Not everybody would have the same thoughts about something. So I might think, like, for example, I think Taylor Swift is the best artist out there. It's a pretty popular thought right now. It's not a circumstance though, because a lot of you might be like, oh, I'm just not even a fan of her music, or she's not that great, or this person is just better, or whatever. So that is a thought, right? It's not a circumstance. It's the meaning that I have put behind it. Very generic example, right? But the other thing about our thoughts that I don't feel like we've talked about a lot is that our thoughts don't just come from nowhere. So really, we have the circumstances, we have the thought. So the thought comes next in the model. But a lot of times when the model is like demonstrated, there's kind of like a line between it, or like something here. And what I want to mention is there is something between there in the model. There's actually a few things. So there are, we have our thinking patterns, that the neural pathways in our brain, the way our brains have been trained to think based on context, things like personal experiences, societal norms, things we see on social media, and also our nervous system. I actually had an interview today on the podcast with a nervous system expert. I'm really excited to air that one. It's coming out on Halloween, so be sure to check it out. Her name is Leah Davidson. She is also certified through the Life Coach School. But what she taught at our professional development for life coaches is that really a big part of what comes between here is the nervous system. We all have a nervous system. We all have heard this before. We know it's like part of our bodies and all the systems that go on. We don't know a lot about it though, but it is huge when it comes to understanding ourselves and the model. So like there's we want to build a bridge between our understanding of the model and our understanding of the nervous system. Now we're not getting deep into that this week. We're going to talk even more about that next week, but it's just understanding that our nervous system, we have these imprints. We have things that have happened throughout our lives that kind of leave these imprints in our brains, in our bodies, that like when something similar happens, without us even realizing it, we might be like, oh, that's kind of like when this happened or whatever. We might get into a different state of, because we're either in homeostasis. Again, we're going to talk about this next week. So again, there's a lot that goes behind our thoughts is all we need to know today. Today, we're talking about the model, but there's a lot that goes on with our thoughts. And so when we are observing our thoughts, I feel like a lot of people with the model, I know some of you here know the model, we might tend to use it against ourselves. Like, well, why do I just keep thinking this? Like, or why am I thinking this in the first place? If I can just change my thought and things can be better, like, why can't I just do that? And it's because we're not meant to just change our thoughts all the time. And the model isn't here to tell us we just have to change our thoughts. It's just a tool to help us understand what is going on. But what happens when we have a thought is there are no transmitters. So we have a thought about something, and then this is when the brain goes down to the body. Remember I talked about there's the body that goes up to the brain, and then the brain goes to the body. We're talking about the model. So our brain, our thoughts go into our body, and it causes a F. Can you guess what the F stands for? Feeling. Yeah. I know there's a delay, so I'm like, okay, that would be awkward. So I'm going to just put it there. So the feeling, right? So we have a thought, and that causes a feeling. Now, our feelings are the emotion, the sensations we have inside our body that are caused by our thoughts. So it's not like, oh, I'm super hungry or whatever. Like that's a sensation in your body, but this is a sensation like I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling excited, or I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling content. I'm feeling proud. Any sort of feeling would come from that thought in our minds that we are having. But before we get too much deeper into this, I feel like the difference between the circumstances and our thoughts is very important to understand before we get into this, because what tends to happen, so this is the first half of the model, we tend to say things like, okay, tell me if you've ever said something like this, like these kids are making me frustrated. Have you ever thought or said something like this, either about your own children or about children in your classroom or about children in the restaurant who are making a lot of noise or something, or anything like that? You say, this thing is making me frustrated. We tend to say things like this. But this is where it gets interesting, because this is where we're saying that the circumstance is what's causing our feelings. Like these kids, again, their circumstance, whatever they are doing, whatever other people do is a circumstance. We don't have any control over it. So when we say things like this, we are blaming the circumstance for our feelings. But really, there's something in between there. We're having a thought that, like, whatever we're thinking about it, like, I put so much work into this and they don't care, or they're not getting it, or they're not going to get a good enough score, or whatever we might be thinking that's causing you to feel frustrated, or this isn't going the way I planned. There's something else there. It's not the kids, it's themselves. It's the thought that's making us feel frustrated. So that is just kind of the reason why we really want to get good at identifying the difference between our circumstances and our thoughts. So what I want to do is, and luckily I'm a very fast typer, I'm going to put some statements up here before we move on in the model. And I want you to tell me whether you think that it is a circumstance or a thought. So these students are disrespectful. There we go. Tell me in the chat, is that a circumstance or a thought? So remember, our circumstances are just what is happening, neutral. There's no meaning put behind it yet. The thoughts are what we tell ourselves. There's a story behind it. Not everybody would agree on the exact meaning. Mary, perfect. And Mary's first time here and she got it. So these students are disrespectful. That is a thought, right? We're having the thought that they're disrespectful. The way that we know it's a thought is that somebody else might not think they're being disrespectful. They might just think they're being kids. Or even if you were to say, what does it mean to be disrespectful? We might describe it in different ways. So that is how we know it's a thought. Okay, I'm going to do just a few more before we move on. I am an anxious person. Thought, right? It is a thought. That's a thought that, I mean, if you listen to my podcast or I'm going to talk about in my book, it's a thought I've had a lot. Like, I'm an anxious person. It's a label we're putting on it, right? You might, like, in a moment feel anxiety, but calling yourself an anxious person, that is a thought. Okay, I realized I picked only thoughts. That's okay. You were all great at being the thought police. Okay, one more. I'm going to try. I said one more, but we're doing one more. Thought or circumstance. So Hannah, what if that person has that diagnosis? So that is diagnosis. That's a little bit different. Like, I mean, like if you do have a diagnosis of like depression or anxiety that your doctor's given you, or it's like a health condition, then yeah, that would be a circumstance. But I mean, and that might not have been the best example because like I should have used a different label than anxious. We could have used a different one. Like I am a lazy person or something. That was just one for me. I was telling myself, and I mean, I did end up getting a diagnosis, but also like me continuing to tell myself, even though I did get a diagnosis for me personally, I'm not saying for everybody, it wasn't helpful for me to continue telling myself that. Like continuing to think that, yeah, there's a good one, Carol. I'm a person with anxiety. It's kind of like the person first like thing, you know, it's the way we phrase it. Because the way we like telling myself I had a diagnosis of postpartum anxiety, I did, but yet telling myself I'm an anxious person, that was not helpful to me. So it's also just knowing if that is helpful to you. Like what Carol said there, I love that suggestion, might have been a little more helpful. And see, this is where I love your commentary so we can get clear on things, because that was a good question. And I probably could have pulled a better example, but I'm glad I pulled that one because we get to talk about it and get clear on things. So, and I see answers for this one. Yeah, this is a circumstance. We could walk in and see I have 27 students in my class. And yeah, totally just a circumstance, right? Okay, let's talk about the next parts of the model. So when we have a certain feeling, so whether that is anxious or sad or excited or proud or happy or disappointed, any, like, you know, I love the vocabulary of feelings that we can build. We've had other calls about that, about like vocabulary with our language, or building our feelings vocabulary can be super powerful. But when we have a feeling, the important thing is understanding when we feel that way, what actions do we do? And when we're looking at the model, we don't only look at the actions that we are doing when we feel that way. We look at the things that we do and that we don't do. And I want to put here like the sensation, sentence in our mind, meaning behind the circumstance. I can spell. Okay, actions, they're the things we do and the things that we don't do when we're feeling a certain way. Because sometimes when we feel a certain way, it blocks us from the full access to options of what we can do. I'll talk through some examples of this, but sometimes if you're feeling anxious about something and you're like spiraling and you're doing all these things that you're doing, you're maybe not doing something else that might, like if you were just feeling curious about it or whatever. And again, this is not to beat ourselves up or saying I'm doing everything wrong. It's to give us awareness about what happens in the moment in time that we are in this model, because we can jump models too. Like we're not like, oh, this is me all the time, I'm stuck here. That's not true. We can, and I mean, again, if you're dysregulated, you might be stuck there in a moment, right? But it's not like this is you forever, what I'm saying. So things we do and things that we don't do, those are our actions. And then our actions lead to our results. So what we do, the result of what we do is from our actions. So what tends to happen a lot of times with the model, and sometimes this is even more obvious than others. So if I were to do this on the board, which I'm not since I didn't have my marker, a lot of times we draw a little arrow from the results up to the thought, because sometimes what we think ends up really mirroring itself in the results. Sometimes it's not as clear. Sometimes it's not exact, but there are times where it really does. And it's super fascinating and super interesting. So now this model, like I mentioned, it's an awareness tool to see how our thoughts are really powerful and can shape our reality. It was created by my mentor, Brooke Castillo. It's basically a simple way to understand. It's based on cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's just simple enough that really anybody can take this tool and use it themselves. Like what you can do is you can kind of do what I call a thought download, where you write down all your thought, like just everything you're thinking. You can pull one of your thoughts and be like, when I think this, what do I feel? What do I do? What's the result of that? Like it's simple enough that as you continue to attend these calls in the club, you'll even be able to start utilizing it yourself and getting some amazing self-awareness with it. Gloria said she has trouble finding the results sometimes. So when you try it yourself and you get stuck, because it is kind of tricky, like it took me a few years before I felt super confident in the models I could create myself. You can always bring it to a call, or I feel like a really underutilized feature in the club right now is that Ask a Coach portal. You can put in like, hey, I started this model. Here was my thought download. Here's the model I've started creating. What feedback do you have for me? Like, those are some of my favorite ones to do. Like, I mean, and I don't do them all the time. Bonnie is the one who probably does them the most. She's done quite a few calls in here too. But it's a lot, just kind of getting that outside perspective, because sometimes when you're doing it yourself, it really is hard to get like neutral about it, because like it's your thoughts, you are in it. And even me as a coach, like I need help sometimes making my models, because like when you're in it, you're like, no, this is a fact. And it's like, well, maybe it's not. And like, you know, somebody else can see that, but you always can't. So, or you can't, not you always can't. That's not true. But sometimes you can't see it is what I meant. So the model is a tool, again, like I mentioned, we use when we're regulated. We're going to talk about more about when this is a tool you want to use, when you want to use something else first, and then come back to the model. The model is an incredible tool for your toolbox. It is one of my favorites, but we want to make sure we're using it appropriately, which we're going to talk about next week. But first, I want to do some models with you. I see that Mary has her hand up. Mary, tell me in the chat, are you wanting to come on and be coached and do a model? Because if so, I'm totally down for that. I have an example we can go through together as well, or we can utilize the chat feature and create some models together, which is a lot of fun. I love doing models. Like I could just do a model-thon. We should do that sometime, where it's like, okay, let's create as many models as we can to help give us some understanding. Oh, Mary, your hand is down now. Okay, no worries. If you want to come on and get coached, you can. Also, the great thing about these model mastery calls is we don't have to bring somebody on. We can also just kind of create as many models as we can using the chat. So one example I have that I think will just help us to get some awareness is one that I think I started bringing up at the beginning. This model I always love because I feel like it reflects a situation a lot of us can relate to, because all of us here generally work with kids in some form or another. We have probably the highest percentage of teachers in the club, but we do have a growing number of homeschool parents. I'm a homeschool parent. I've been a teacher. A lot of us are parents and teachers. So these kids are lazy. Let's go with that. So when we think that, let's just pretend you think that, okay? So think that thought right now. These kids are lazy. What do you think you feel? What do you think we would feel in that moment? Mary said, you can teach me. I will try. Mary, let's do one of your models next then. I would love to teach you. You can either come on or we can do the chat. Either way. So these kids are lazy. I would say that frustrated is the emotion I would probably see the most with this. There are different ones that might come up though, but let's say we're feeling frustration. Yeah, Brittany says frustration. So these kids are lazy. But yeah, Sarah said frustrated. Yeah. So these kids are lazy. You feel frustrated. So when you're thinking these kids are lazy and you're feeling frustrated about it, what do we tend to do? So we're looking at our actions now. I'm going to like, now that we took out the other part, I'm going to, waiting on feelings is not always frustrated, even though that's a common one when we're coaching. I'm going to put this here just so we remember. Actions, results. Okay, so when we're feeling frustrated, what do we tend to do? Mad, upset, those would work too. Annoyed would work too. So feelings is really, it's up to whoever the model is actually about. Now we're doing kind of a hypothetical model right now. It's not a specific person. We're just kind of doing a hypothetical one. And the thing I love about this is we can get a little more, when we're doing hypotheticals, we can get a little more aggressive. That's not the word I'm looking for, but a little more, like nobody's going to be taking it personally. You know, we can just really get into like explanations behind it and everything. Okay, Sarah says, speak aggressively. Yeah, so we might like kind of lash out, especially I feel like with my own kids, which is sad, might be even more so than my students. Speak aggressively. What has come up before? Stop teaching. Yeah. What I've seen is some teachers say before is they'll like have to take a break and sit at their desk. Talk to other teachers about it, complaining, not like in a like what do I do about it way, but just like, oh, this is so hard, like these kids are so lazy, you know. And nothing, again, like sometimes we need that camaraderie or whatever, right? Like we're not doing this to say, oh wow, I can't believe she's doing that, like whoever this hypothetical person is. It's just interesting to see kind of what we do. Might send kids out of the room, things like that. Vent to others, keep doing the same things rather than trying something new is what I've seen before. Like people say with this, like when I was like, well, what are you not doing? Because first we look at what are you doing? Like if I'm coaching someone, I'm usually like, what? And we're in the model part of coaching because there are times where we're just like exploring and seeing what's going on. But if we're working on a model, we're like, what are you doing? And then we go, okay, what are you not doing? And she's like, well, I'm not trying anything new. This has come up before. Not trying anything new. I'm just kind of doing the same things. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so you can see the whole thing together. For the next one, I'm going to turn off the caps lock too. But when we see these kids are lazy, and this is what I actually wrote about in my book. And when I like wrote the result, I'm like, whoa, that is a bold, that's the word, bold result. The result of this could potentially be, and this is a near one, I am being lazy. And I'm currently, and again, I put currently because it's just in this moment, being lazy in my own classroom management practices. Like, isn't that crazy? Sometimes when we think, oh, they're being so lazy, getting frustrated, then what do? We don't show up in the way we want to show up. And maybe we're doing what we're accusing the other person of doing. That tends to happen a lot. In not just like the classroom, but just in life in general. Like we're like, oh, this person, they're doing this or whatever. And then we don't realize that by like kind of putting that out there, we end up kind of doing what we're accusing the other person of doing. So fascinating. And nothing wrong with either person, nothing wrong with the teacher, nothing wrong with the kids. It's just fascinating what our brains do. And does it make sense to all of you? Like this result line that I came up with, it's a very bold one. Sometimes I try to be a little more gentle with it, but since we're going hypothetical and I want to show how it can sometimes mirror what we're thinking, isn't that fascinating? Gloria says, so true. Yeah. Sarah said, no fun things until they get it together. Yeah, that's another thing we could put here. No fun things until they get it together. Give up. I see some other ones. Lose patience. Yeah, all of these go along with that result, right? Vanessa said yes. So it's fascinating. So fascinating. Okay, does anybody want to do a model together? We can just do it in the chat. Or what is a comment? It doesn't even have to be like, oh, this is a thought I'm having right at this moment. But what is something that might come up like from time to time as you're teaching or parenting or in life? And we can kind of see how in general, we're just doing general models right now that we're doing together.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, Siri didn't get that. That's okay, Siri. Okay. Let's try.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know why Siri keeps talking to me. Well, let's see. What is a good thought we could do with the model? Or, okay, here's another one. Siri needs her own model. Yeah, apparently Siri wants to get, oh my goodness, Siri is at it again. I don't know what is going on today. Okay, let's do, what's a good thought we could do? I've got a whole list of thoughts right here. Let's take one. Should we do, Siri's always interrupting the lessons too, right? Okay, let's do this one. Whoever thinks this. Anybody ever think that? I am a hot mess. What do we do? And this one, we're going to come up with the result line together too. I want to help you through the entire process. I'm not coming up with it this time. We're going to come up with options. So thought, I am a hot mess. That's what we're going with right now. Okay. Feeling. How do we feel when we think we're a hot mess? Sarah said she has thought this. How do you feel when you think I am a hot mess? And then we'll go with the consensus. We'll go with the most popular vote. So I am a hot mess. Like if you just kind of think, I am a hot mess. How does it make you feel? Make you feel inadequate, sad? Yeah. Let's go with sad. You see a couple of sads. I feel like that encompasses, because we don't always, we've talked about having the language for our feelings. It's kind of like, sometimes in coaching, we can contradict ourselves a little bit, and it's fine. But having the language behind your feelings is so powerful. But at the same time, when we're doing a model, sometimes it's just like, you know, it's more about understanding what you're feeling in your body rather than the word itself. So sometimes the word can help describe what is going on in your body better and give some better details to it. But if we're coaching and you say sad and you're able to describe like how you feel about that, like, yeah, that's great. Bad mood, down. Yes. Yes. All these kind of go into the category of sad. So we'll just go with that. So when we're feeling sad because we're thinking we are a hot mess, what do? We might shut down a little bit, but what does that look like? Like when we say shut down, what does that mean? We might like, tell me in the chat, internalize every thought. Yeah. We might continue to think negative thoughts about myself. Search for evidence, right? Because when we tell ourselves, our brain likes to be right. Yeah, Hannah says it becomes me. So when we say I'm a hot mess, then suddenly our brain is like, I'm a hot mess. Let's see all the ways. How am I a hot mess? Like, okay, so we search for evidence of how I'm a hot mess. Withdraw. You might withdraw from your students, from others. Stop and do something else. You might grab a chocolate bar or wine or whatever your thing is, right? We might start buffering our emotions, which we've talked about on other calls. So buffering, for those who aren't familiar, it's when we do things to avoid feeling our emotions. Might cry. I mean, this is some pretty deep stuff. So when we're doing all these things, we're feeling sad because we're thinking we're a hot mess. What is the result of that? And this is not one where I would say, I am becoming a hot mess. Like, I would not say that, by the way. I mean, you can if you want. But what I think, and I want to hear what you think too. We're going to come up with options. I want to stop for a second and see what you all come up with, though, before I say what I think. Use that as an excuse. Yeah. Use it as an excuse. Tell it to other people. I mean, we could go on and on, right? What don't we do? That's what we didn't look at yet. What don't we do when we say we're a hot mess? Don't look for ways I'm doing well. Don't look at my wins. Discount anything positive, right? So again, when we're in this, we look at what are we doing, but also what are we not doing that we might do if we were thinking something else about ourselves, like I'm doing the best I can. So what I think is the result, yeah, don't, yeah, like if there's something that you do want to fix, like you're not being proactive about fixing, reorganize, whatever it is you're thinking you're a hot mess about. Yeah, kind of being a little dramatic about it, right? We're kind of like, oh, I'm just such a hot mess, but we're not necessarily like, what am I, like not looking at, I mean by that, because I mean, okay, let's look at this. I am a hot mess. Like, for one, that is a thought because we kind of know what we, like it's a common phrase, hot mess. So we know like, oh, that kind of means like, you know, we're a little scattered or whatever, but like, you're not a hot mess. You're not like a flaming pile of papers or something. So it's like, we're not getting clear on what you even mean by that. Like when I say I'm a hot mess, like, well, what is actually the problem here? Like, is there something like, oh, do I just feel like I'm disorganized? Okay, what can I do about it? But when we're thinking that, that's not what we're doing, right? So the result of this is, I mean, I want you all to practice though, because I feel like it's a good skill. Try to think just anything. It can be terrible. Like if you're like, oh, I don't know if this is it, just put it in the chat. What do you think the result like of doing all these things? What is that the result of doing these things? Like if you are internalizing every thought, continuing to think negative things about yourself, searching for evidence about how you're a hot mess, you're withdrawing, you stop and do everything else, grab a chocolate bar or whatever. Don't try to find the positive. Don't fix it. Use it as an excuse. Cry. Tell it to other people. Don't look for ways you're doing well. Don't look at your wins. Discount the positive. Not being proactive about fixing it. Not looking what I mean by that. Yeah, Gloria said take a breath to regroup. But we're probably not doing that while we're telling ourselves this, right? Like we might do that when we're like, okay, actually, hang on. That's when we're like changing models, right? We might be thinking something else. We like take a deep breath, like, okay, I don't want to keep thinking that. Let's move on to this one, you know. Adding something else to do. Yeah, so Sarah said adding something else to do. Yeah, we're kind of continuing, Brittany said we're continuing the negative cycle, right? Yeah, I love that. So the result is I'm going to just write a few options here. Continuing the negative cycle. We're adding another thing to do. I feel like another thing you could do, or that another result that we could possibly say is like, I am becoming a person who doesn't give herself any grace. Like, because again, it doesn't have to exactly mirror it. Like, look at that. You're just like becoming a person who's like so negative about themselves is what happens when you tell this. It's like that vicious spiral that, Teresa, negative. I'm in a negative downward spiral. Yes, see, look how amazing you're all doing. So the model is really an art. It's not, I mean, it's like a science, like it's backed by science, but it's also an art. There's no like right or wrong. There's no like, oh no, you got the result wrong. It's supposed to be this, or, oh, you didn't get all those things right. It's just what we observe. And yeah, that's what's so fascinating about the model. Ooh, this was a good one. And we have such good participation today. I'm so thrilled. Okay, before we close out, because let's see, this was a 45-minute call today. We're right on that, which is totally fine. What questions do we have? Oh, if I want to reprint the model, where do I find the CTFAR? Yes. So in your club dashboard, and Carol might have the link available. If you do, Carol, go ahead and pop that in the chat. But in your member dashboard, and let me see if I can just pull it up right here. We are, by the way, and I told this to Teresa yesterday on our member success call, we are rearranging the member dashboard here soon, just to make things a little easier for you. Nothing like you get is changing. I feel like the coaching area is just a little bit messy, and we're making it easier. Oh, perfect. Carol's got it for you. But in your member dashboard, you've got the link right there, so you can just grab it from the chat. But where you would find it now is in the member dashboard in the coaching section. We're actually going to be making some new intro modules, which will include a few intro videos about coaching, which will include this printable. We're going to be kind of rearranging some things eventually next year. So we're going to have some basic modules here soon and a revamp of the dashboard. And we're going to do a big tour of that on the November 9th, like birthday party call. It's going to be just like, that's why it's 2 hours. It's going to be like, we're going to dive into the planner and everything. We're going to do a tour of the new dashboard and everything. There's going to be some new videos and all that. And then next year, we're going to have a full course in there because I'm writing this book and I'm like, I am learning, like I learned so much in my certification and I'm learning even more right now, researching for this book. I'm going to make a full course and club members are going to have access for free. I haven't decided if we're going to sell the course or not, or if it'll be just for members. I'm thinking it might be just for members, but that's all still up in the air. But Yeah, so that is where you can find it for now. I would just click on that link because if I tell you where to find it, if anybody's on the replay in like 3 weeks, it's not going to be accurate anymore because we're going to make it even better for all of you. Okay, so the results is a fact, not a solution. Oh, yes. Okay, I feel like this is the one thing that I always need to remember to explain. I remember Hannah saying this too. So the result is not the solution. That is what we might talk about. We might talk about the solution after we gain some awareness. When we're looking at the model, we are just looking at facts. We are gaining awareness. We look at the C, T, F, A, R. The result is what happens by these actions. It's not what we're doing to change it, because sometimes in the model, we don't want to change it. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it's gaining awareness. Sometimes just gaining the awareness is enough. We're like, oh, I see how that's going on. And that alone is like done. Sometimes we need to like kind of sit with it a little while and be like, oh, that's interesting. I see how that's happening, but I'm just not quite ready to change that yet. And then other time, yeah, Gloria, so you were jumping right to fixing it, which is what we all tend to do. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this call, the model is not necessarily to jump right in and fix it. It's to give us awareness about what is going on. So why isn't the result how we want to change it? Because the result, so it's circumstances, thoughts. So what the model is for is to give us awareness about feelings, actions. Okay, and this is what happens. So this is the result of these actions. Now, if you're wanting to figure out how you want to change it, what you would look at is this is your unintentional model. So this is what is naturally already happening. When you get to the point where before you can change the model, you have to understand and believe the current model. Like you have to like be, okay, I totally understand how this is happening. You can't still be like, oh, but no, it's the circumstance causing it, because then you're not quite ready. Once you kind of get into the model, you're like, I see this, I have this awareness. Oh my goodness, I want to change it now. What do I do? That is when you do an intentional model. And that is where you leave the C the same circumstance. And then you change the thought. And then you see how that changes the feeling, changes the actions, and changes the results. So, and that is where the result will change. Now, the thought, you might be like, oh, I want to change to this thought. Like, I just want to like complete 180 it. We can't always do that. Sometimes we have to use like bridge thoughts. Like if your thought is, I'm a hot mess, you might not jump right to, I am incredible. I've totally got this. Everything is amazing. Like you could try doing a model about that, but it might not play out in real time because you don't believe it. So you have to do a thought that you can believe. So you might work your way up. You might be like, I am learning, or I am doing the best I can, or I am learning that I am not a hot mess. Like, and you might work your way up. And that is how you make the change, is with understanding your current model, having so much grace for yourself, getting awareness around it, and then you can use the model to create an intentional one. So unintentional is just what happens. Intentional is you're being intentional about your thoughts. Great question. I love this. So yeah, the model, we can use it for unintentional models, is where we start. That's just where we're gaining awareness. And then we can use the model to work intentionally. And there are times where I've even used it backwards. Like this is the result I want. For example, when I was doing my life coach certification, I worked backwards and I had my final call that day. I was so anxious. I'm like, well, I want to pass this final call. So I put pass my certification call. And then I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to do that? How do I need to feel? What do I need to think? So it's like a really powerful tool that we can utilize in so many different ways. And don't feel overwhelmed by it, because we will continue to go over it in different calls. We'll explain different ways you can use it. It really is something that you could be studying for years, just like I have been, and will continue to do. And then adding other tools to your toolbox as well to know, like, okay, I'm going to use the model here, but then here I need to do some other things. I need to get into my body. I need to ground myself, So we are going to be here for you every step of the way, helping you to build your coaching toolbox. And we'll be here to coach you and help you learn how you can use the tools in your day-to-day life as well. Okay, Hannah says, thanks, Kelsey. I know you've explained it before, but I took a pic this time, so maybe I'll remember. No, I love going over this. And also, the great thing about the club is we learn from each other, because like there are people like Mary, she said was her first time here. And then I realized like sometimes I forget like, oh, I didn't explain that part. So I love when you ask questions so I can clarify things. So I'm gonna make a note of that to make sure that when I explain the model, that I explain the result is the action. The result is just, it reveals itself through your actions is what happens. Like basically you just keep packing that action line until you see, oh, when all this thing is happening, this is the result. Like you don't come up with it per se. It kind of reveals itself through the big list of actions. So like down here when we had like all these things, like this just was the result of all of these things here. Okay. Well, that was so much fun. I will see you all next week and in the Facebook group. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Wife Teacher Mommy, the podcast. If you enjoyed our time together, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you're ready to take the next step, I'd love for you to join me face-to-face at my next free virtual mindset masterclass. In this masterclass, I'll share my full story of how it transformed my teacher overwhelm and anxiety into balance, authenticity, and a true understanding of myself. And the best news, it'll work for you too. I'll break down my 5-step framework, share inspiring stories that will help shift your mindset, and you'll even get to see life coaching in action. You'll get a free resource and a special opportunity just for joining us, and you won't be able to get this anywhere else. Did I mention this masterclass is free? You've got nothing to lose. All you need to do is sign up, add it to your calendar, and commit to showing up live. Go to wifeteachermommy.com/masterclass to sign up, or head to the link in the show notes. I will see you at the masterclass.